Hey everyone, welcome to Mr. Geopolitics, and today we're going to be talking about the latest developments in Ukraine for September the 11th and 12th. So basically today the biggest news coming out of Ukraine is that the Russians struck 3 power plants in Ukraine, the biggest one being in Kharkiv. They launched cruise missiles from the Black Sea, and basically from the Black Sea, those cruise missiles hit various targets, various power stations, and there were power outages all over eastern Ukraine for several hours. The metro wasn't working, the water wasn't running, and basically people were panicking. Now, there were outages in Kharkiv, power outages in Kharkiv, in Dnipro, and all the areas in between, and Kryvyi Rih, Zelensky's hometown. Let me just get rid of this line. So Kryvyi Rih, where else? Sumy Oblast right here. Right, the city of Sumy, and it extended actually to some parts of Kiev as well. So, and oh yeah, Kramatorsk was affected as well. So it had a huge effect, but right now the power is back on. This was like about 12 hours ago. The power is back on now, and they're mostly using backup power. So they're fine for now, but some people think this is basically Russia taking off its kids' gloves, because as many people know, Russia has the capability, they do have the power to basically send Ukraine into the Stone Age. They can destroy all of Ukraine's power stations, water treatment plants. If they wanted to, they could just completely deprive Ukraine of electricity, water, basically vital infrastructure. They could destroy all of it if they wanted to. But so far they haven't, and others think that this is Russia retaliating for the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. I believe there were artillery strikes on the nuclear plant again today or yesterday. And this has continued for something like over a month now. And the Russians have had to shut down the nuclear power plant. Basically, the Russians wanted to cut off the electricity generated by this power plant to the parts of Ukraine controlled by the Ukrainians. And the way the Ukrainians saw it, the way they felt about it was something like, you know, if we can't have it, you can't have it either, because the Russians wanted to connect it to the Russian electricity, their own electricity grid, the Russian electricity grid. But the Ukrainians, as Zelensky said, he said that is unacceptable. And it's a good thing that, see, that's the largest nuclear power plant in Ukraine, and it's a good thing that Soviet nuclear power plants were built. They're very sturdy, so basically they're built to a certain standard, so that supposedly, if a commercial airliner fell from 10 kilometers in the sky into the power plant, it still wouldn't cause a catastrophic reaction. What do I mean by catastrophic reaction? Basically, a radioactive cloud. Basically, what happened at what's the name again? Chernobyl. Yeah, what happened at Chernobyl? But the Ukrainians are really playing with fire. I mean, they keep saying the Russians are bombing the nuclear power plant, but that's hard to believe because Russia has soldiers and such stationed there. So I mean, it's I don't think the Russians would continue bombing their own nuclear power plant. But the reason I say the Ukrainians are playing with fire is because if you look at this area, the general vicinity, there's 3 large Ukrainian cities nearby: Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Kryvyi Rih. But to the south, where the Russians control the territory, there's just smaller settlements, maybe some towns, villages, and such. So the Ukrainians are the ones who stand to lose if there's a catastrophic reaction. But I don't know. They keep bombing it, but anyways, that's one of the reasons people think Russia did what it did today, which led to the blackouts. And another reason is that basically Putin is pissed. From what I'm hearing, Putin is really angry. He fired some of the military commanders who were in charge of especially the ones in charge of the region they just lost, Izium and Kharkiv. I mean, they lost over 5,000 square kilometers, so that's no joke. And that was only in like a couple of days, 3-4 days, 5 days, I think. Yeah, it started on the 7th, and so yeah, that was barely 4 days. I mean, and today the Russians actually withdrew from the northern areas. They controlled some territory in the north. But they withdrew from that territory, and they also withdrew from the territory north of Kharkiv, because for a while they controlled a slit of territory north of Kharkiv, and then the last bit of territory they controlled west of the Oskil River was basically, it looked something like this. Very rough, but yeah, they withdrew from all of the territory. They said, you know what, screw it, there's no point. And they withdrew from the north of Kharkiv, and they withdrew from the north of this area. This entire area you see in blue, basically separated by this river, but everything to the right of this line, the Ukrainians basically liberated. So that is no joke. I mean, if we measure it out from the top, get a rough estimate, I mean, that's a lot of territory. That is 100 miles by. So that's a lot of territory, right? Yeah, like 5,800 miles. That would be something, I think something like 9,000 square kilometers altogether. I don't know. In the news reports they're saying 2,000 square kilometers, but that's not correct. Anyways, if we continue on, one thing I wanted to mention is that the Ukrainians just had a major victory, right? And whenever there are victories like this, people tend to hyper focus on little events, on events like when the Russians, during the first phase of the war, they invaded Ukraine across a 1,400 kilometer front. See all this territory in blue in the north, right here. And then they had to withdraw, and they sustained massive losses in terms of casualties, and a lot of material was lost. A lot of tanks, a lot of armored vehicles, trucks. So in those few weeks that during the first phase of the war, I believe up to this day the Russians lost the majority of the equipment that they've lost in Ukraine, and that was only in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. And the Ukrainians, I mean, this war has gone on for 6 months, so it's a 6-month war. It's been 200 days, but in the first 3 weeks the Russians lost, up to this day, something like 60% of, I think now it's 60% of their total losses were in those 3 weeks. So yeah, I mean, everyone was hyper focused on that, the fact that the Russians were retreating, and everyone was saying, yeah, the Ukrainians are going to kick the Russians out of Ukraine in a couple of weeks, whatnot. But while that was happening, I was looking at the big picture. I was thinking, you know what? The Russians may have withdrawn from the north, but in the south, they've taken large chunks of territory, because they went from Crimea to Kherson. A couple days they took Kherson, and then from Kherson, they didn't have much luck going west. So, but anyways, they went east, and these areas in highlighted in dark red, those are the areas the Russians controlled before the war. So this is the Donbass, and right here's Crimea. So basically, the Russians established a bridgehead connecting Crimea to the Donbass by land. And that was one of their main goals, and they had taken all that territory. And people were raving about what had happened in Kiev and Kharkiv, and I was thinking, well, people are not looking at the big picture. Russia still controls lots of territory, and this war isn't over yet. That's what I said back then. And then when the Russians attacked Severodonetsk, they changed their tactics, because initially they wanted to replicate what they did in Crimea, right? They wanted to just roll in, and they were hoping the Ukrainians would fold, right? The government would flee. That's what the U.S. intelligence believed as well. But anyways, when the Russians took Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, Severodonetsk, they fought for it for a month, and then Lysychansk fell a week later. Two decent-sized cities. They're actually twin cities. You could think of it as one big metropolitan area, but anyway, well, not metropolitan, but you could think of it as one city, but they're two cities. But anyways, a lot of people were hyper focused on that, and they were thinking, well, now the Russians are on the offensive, and they're using their artillery to pound Ukrainian positions. They're using their advantage in firepower, and the Russians, it's only a matter of time before they win this war. And people were thinking Seversk will fall within a week, and then the rest of the Donbass will fall, and this it's only just a matter of a few weeks' time. But in the big picture, that didn't happen. And now the Ukrainians, they've taken Kharkiv. But if we look at this counteroffensive as a whole, right now, what are the Ukrainians' options? What are their options? Okay, so right now, the Ukrainians didn't continue their counteroffensive west. Why? Because right here is the Oskil River, and river crossings, rivers are a natural barrier during wars. And the Ukrainians, rightfully so, are afraid that if they cross, the Russians could blow the bridge after a certain point, and then their forces would be stranded, separated, and the forces that had crossed would be surrounded and destroyed. So river crossings are always risky. To the south, the Oskil River, it goes from north to south. Then it turns into the Seversky Donets River. And the Seversky Donets River, the Ukrainians have already crossed, and they've actually taken this settlement of Ozern, and they've taken Stary Caravan, I believe it is, if it loads. Stary Caravan. Anyways, they've taken these areas, but these areas are surrounded by forests. Forests are excellent for defenders to hide in, snipers, anti-ATGM teams, ambush squads. So these areas are surrounded by forests, and if the Ukrainians, another thing is there's a river, the Seversky Donetsk, right here. So essentially the Russians could blow the bridges at any time. They haven't yet, but they could. Anyways, the Ukrainians yesterday and today tried to storm Liman, But they were repelled today, and they were forced to retreat. But anyways, it's a risky venture whenever there's river crossings involved. And then there was speculation that the Ukrainians might even attack from Seversk. They might have tried to take back Lysychansk, but you see, the Russians didn't really put up much of a fight in the Kharkiv sector, which the Ukrainians just took. They basically were caught off guard, caught by surprise, and the Ukrainians had overwhelming numbers, and basically the Russians just withdrew. They mostly just withdrew and there were no major clashes. So the Russians didn't draw a line in the sand and decide to fight. But if the Ukrainians attack Lysychansk, it's not a small settlement or village or anything. It's a decent sized city. So, and then there's a river crossing to get to Severodonetsk. So there's another river crossing, which is a headache, which is risky. And if the Russians do decide to actually fight for the city, then the Ukrainians would have to fight house to house, and who knows, the Ukrainians might even get surrounded by Russian troops, and they might get encircled. Their forces might get encircled. Because basically, the reason the Ukrainians attacked this region is because the Russians were very much undermanned in this region, as it turns out. And we're learning today that the U.S. shared some vital intelligence with the Ukrainians, and that's why they chose to attack this area. But now the Russians, after losing this area, they're on guard, and not only are they on guard, but all the troops, thousands of troops that withdrew to the east, they're there now. So attacking in this direction, there's reinforcements that have come from Russia and all the troops that withdrew. Going towards Liman, as I just mentioned, river crossing to Severodonetsk, and the Russians themselves are have been constantly attacking Seversk for the last month or two, ever since taking Lysychansk. So basically, their forces here are saturated. The Russians are also trying to storm Soledar and Bakhmut, and just got reinforcements there. So a few thousand Chechen forces, reinforcements have arrived there, and they're pushing trying to push hard into Soledar and Bakhmut. So all along from this line to here and down south, this entire area is saturated with Russian troops. Now they won't be caught off guard. They're on high alert. And Kodema is here, and the Russians spent a month or more fighting for Kodema, and they've taken Kodema. So basically, the Russians want to now go west. They want to take the settlements here, and basically they want to go west, take Bakhmut, go west, take Soledar and Seversk. So this entire area is saturated with Russian troops. Also Pisky. Today in Pisky, the Russians have been fighting for, I think, 2 months or something to clear Pisky of Ukrainian forces. And now they want to expand and go for other settlements, with the eventual goal of encircling Avdiivka, which is a very entrenched area. So there's a saturation of Russian troops here, and I saw a video today which showed the Ukrainians attacking this area with several tanks, and Russian artillery basically destroyed several of the tanks, and the Ukrainians were forced to flee from Pesky with some losses. They maybe it was a probing attack, I don't know, but anyways, they were forced to flee. So basically, here as well, the lines are saturated, and this area is heavily entrenched because for 7 years the Ukrainians were fighting. Before this war started, the Ukrainians were fighting with the Russian separatists to try to take Donetsk city. So this entire area is saturated as well. Now, the area that isn't saturated, that many people believe the Ukrainians are going to focus on next, is this area right here. This area in Zaporizhia, in the Zaporizhia Oblast. And let me just fix something. Let me get rid of these lines. And basically this area, the Russians took some territory recently, and this area looks more more like this. So the Russians are outside Volodar right now, and they're outside Velika Novosilka. And these areas in blue they took recently. Anyways, my point is, the Russians themselves have said that the Ukrainians are clearing the mines, that they're clearing their own mines in these areas, and there's a lot of UAV activity. So the Russians are pretty certain, and most analysts think that the next area that the Ukrainians are going to attack is right here. And because basically the offensive to take the Kharkiv region, it was only three days. So the majority of the Ukrainian forces are ready, and they're pretty much ready to go. So the Ukrainians are basically planning on sending that army, the same army that had success in Kharkiv, sending them to the south, combining with whatever forces they have here, and then what they're going to do is they're going to attack this area. And the Russians need to prepare. They need to prepare because this area, the fighting has been this area has seen ever since the Russians took this area. It's been one of the slowest areas in terms of activity. So the Ukrainians want to take this area, and if they do take this area, what that would mean is they would cut the Russian bridgehead from Crimea to the Donbass, and basically isolate the Russians, split the Russians in two, in the Donbass and then Crimea and to the north, as Zaporizhia. And we know that in Kherson, unlike in Kharkiv, the Ukrainian offensive hasn't been going that great. The Ukrainians have sustained significant losses, and they haven't made many gains. Basically, all they've gained is a village here. No, okay, 1 second. What the hell? Yes. So they've taken a village here, Isokopilia, and aside from that, they've taken a few settlements here. But these settlements, some of them are abandoned, and they're hamlets, what you call hamlets, smaller than a village there. Each settlement is like has a few dozen houses with a few streets. So they've taken this, and this. So they've taken that, which could change hands at any time easily. In the south, Alexandrivka, actually the Russians control this. And the Ukrainians have made something like they've made something like 6 attempts to take Alexandrivka, and each time they've been repelled, sometimes with heavy losses. So, yeah, it hasn't been that good for the Ukrainians. If we go to the David Breed area of this sector, the Ukrainians are stuck in a really, really precarious situation. This area, there's a trend. The Ukrainians keep, because there's the Inglis River right here, right? And river crossings are not rivers are a natural barrier during wars. Anyways, there's a trend. The Ukrainians keep building pontoon crossings, pontoon bridges, and they cross their forces. The Russians don't do anything. Then when their forces have crossed, then what happens is the Russians destroy the pontoon bridges. The Ukrainian forces here at Suki Stavok and these little settlements here, Kostromka and Bezimim, they get cut off from their supply lines, and then the Russians who surround them basically proceed to bombard them relentlessly. And then rinse and repeat. The Ukrainians again build pontoon bridges, send more reinforcements, and this has gone on for ever since the Kherson counteroffensive began. And yeah, so it's not a good situation. This is like a mini cauldron for the Ukrainians. So overall, the Kherson counteroffensive has not been that successful. And one other thing I'll mention is that a week or so before the Ukrainians began this counteroffensive, the Russians took all of this territory. They basically took all of this territory, and they took it in a day. So if we zoom out, this is a rough estimate, but if we zoom out and we look at how much territory the Russians took in a day, and then a week later the Ukrainians go on a counteroffensive, and they're stuck in a little cauldron here, and they've taken a village here, they've failed 6 times here, and so overall it's not successful. So the Ukrainians are sending reinforcements to Kherson as well to get this counteroffensive going, to get it to because according to the Russians, the Ukrainians have lost. The Russians said something like 3,000, and then it became 4,000. And I've seen footage of destroyed Ukrainian armored vehicles. But anyways, we don't know if we don't know exactly what the numbers are. The Russians claim in the thousands are dead, which would mean, let's say if 3,000 are dead, that would mean 12,000 casualties altogether. Injured, captured, missing. So anyways, in any case, this area, the Ukrainians want to send reinforcements so that they can succeed, and in this area the Russians don't have that many troops, although recently they took this territory in blue, and some believe that the Russians sent reinforcements to this area. But anyways, the Russians have a disadvantage here in this situation, mainly that the Ukrainians have railroad networks, and they can go directly from Kharkiv to this area. And let me just put so they can go to Kharkiv, and then there's railways. This line doesn't represent a railway, but I mean it's 200 kilometers away. That could be done in a day or two. But of course they have heavy equipment as well, so it might take a few days. But the Russians, on the other hand, there's no railway connecting all the Russian-controlled territories together. Like there's no railway that just goes like this, right? There are railways in the area, but the Russians are basically at a disadvantage because using local roads and some of the railways, if they decided to do that, that would actually take them longer to send reinforcements here. So the Ukrainians have a head start. They have a decent sized army of 15 to 25,000 troops, assuming they lost a few thousand troops, which the Russians say they have 3,000 killed in action, but who knows if that's true. But assuming they lost several thousand troops, they still have a decent sized force, and they have some forces here already. So if the Ukrainians can get there in 2 days and launch a large-scale offensive, then the Russians will be at a disadvantage because it might take them a week or more to send their forces here. That also might be why the Russians hit the power lines, because the Ukrainian railway networks depend on power lines, right? Like I told you earlier, the metro stopped working when the Russians attacked the power stations. But in the next few days, what I expect to happen is I expect the Russians to disrupt, because the Russians basically know what the Ukrainians are going to do, what they're planning. So I expect the Russians to disrupt the Ukrainian attempts to get to the south. How are they going to do that precisely? They could hit the railway network, the railway itself. They could hit stops along the way at the railway stations. They could hit the power grid that connects to the railway. They have a lot of options, but that's what I expect to see during the next couple of days. Anyways, this video has gone on longer than I anticipated. For those of you who watched till the end, thank you. And anyways, that's it for today, guys. And please like, share, subscribe, and comment. And I will see you in the next one.